Hey, ugly. Is that your kid? A defective product just like her mom. These were the words thrown at me by my ex-husband, Sean, as he scrutinized me and my daughter, who was sitting in the wheelchair I was pushing, from head to toe, immediately upon our reunion after 13 years. I was about to retort with some foul language when Ken, my current husband, spoke up from behind me. "What's wrong with my daughter?" His deep baritone voice resonated so well that not only I, but also the people around us couldn't help but turn around. However, I might have been the only one to notice the chilly undertone in his voice. Looking back at Sean, I could see his face had turned pale. My name is Rika. I'm 35 years old. I'm a stay-at-home mom living with my 3-year-old daughter Natalie and my husband Ken, who is 3 years younger than me. The house we currently live in was originally built by Ken's parents. Right after Ken and I got married, my mother-in-law passed away suddenly from an illness, leaving her elderly husband living alone. We couldn't just leave my father-in-law by himself, so Ken's parents handed over the house they lived in to us and moved in with my father-in-law. However, one of the reasons, probably, was that they were worried about Ken's financial situation just after he had started his own business. They wanted us to live in their house without having to pay rent, which was a significant decision for us. I was overjoyed by my in-laws' kindness and, until Natalie was born, I used to visit my father-in-law's house every other day, helping with hospital visits and household chores. After Natalie was born, I slowed down a bit, but still made it a point to visit with Ken at least twice a month, helping out wherever we could or giving my in-laws a break to go relax at spa resort. My in-laws always expressed their gratitude, saying, "We're really thankful for all the help, especially during such a busy time with the baby, and Ken has indeed married a wonderful person." To me, no amount of effort could repay the kindness Ken's family, including his parents and twin sister, Sally, have shown me. They've saved my life not once but twice. Ken was marrying for the first time, but I had been through a failed marriage before. I met my first husband, Sean, when I moved to New York for university and started living in an apartment. We became friends as we moved in on the same day and shared information about nearby supermarkets, home improvement stores, and affordable restaurants. Sean attended a prestigious private university known for its stylish campus and media presence, quite different from my practical university. He was tall, handsome. He often said, "A lot of students at my university come from privileged backgrounds, making it feel claustrophobic for someone from the countryside like me. You and I are alike, it's easier because we don't have to put on airs." And so, he started to spend more time at my place, eventually leading to us living together like a couple. Back then, I couldn't believe I was dating a handsome guy like Sean and thought, I might not have the glamour of the female students on Sean's campus, but I can be a comforting presence. I ended up doing all the housework like cooking, cleaning, and laundry, which, in hindsight, was absurd. A man who seeks comfort right at the start of a relationship is hardly ever a good sign, as that comfort is purely self-serving. Because that comfort is just an abbreviation, but it is, in fact, the very egoism that makes it easy for him. But love is blind. I ignored Sean's selfishness, and when he said, "I want to quit my job because it's tough, but I can't afford to because I don't make much. My classes have gotten harder since I've advanced in my program," I suggested, "why don't we move into a slightly bigger apartment? Don't worry about the rent." So, we moved to a new apartment near our initial meeting place, and I ended up covering all the rent. Sean insisted on having 2 phone lines, one for him and one for me, claiming my dad got transferred to Europe for work around the same time I started high school, and my mom went with him. They're very conservative, and if they found out I was living with someone, they might stop sending money or even tell me to drop out. You wouldn't want that, and neither would your parents, even if we're planning to get married eventually. At the time, all I could think about was the prospect of marriage, not considering the implications of his request. This cohabitation put a significant financial burden on me. Since the apartment lease was in my name, I was responsible for not only the rent but also for utilities like electricity, gas, water, the landline phone bill, and internet charges, all of which were being withdrawn from my account. Initially, Sean had nobly offered, "Since you're covering the rent, I'll pay more towards the utilities." However, it wasn't long before he started saying, "Sorry, Rika. I'm short on cash again this month because of social obligations. With job hunting on the horizon, I can't afford to turn down invitations from friends in my seminar." And so, I ended up shouldering all the expenses. Before I knew it, I was also paying for groceries and even the beer Sean drank after his baths, with Sean's contribution being limited to the occasional delivery pizza when his friends came over to hang out. Moreover, whenever he invited seminar or club friends over, he'd tell me, "I haven't told them we're living together because it'd just lead to awkward teasing. You should stay away from the apartment for the day." Outside of university classes, all my time was consumed by part-time jobs and household chores, leaving me with no one to confide in, rant to, or seek refuge with, forcing me to spend nights at manga cafes or diners. The summers were tough, but waiting on a park swing in the cold early mornings for the time when I could return home, without enough money for warmth, I couldn't help but cry, wondering, what am I even doing with my life? As Sean and I reached our senior year and began job hunting in earnest, I finally snapped, accusing him of living like a leech. "You need to start contributing to our living expenses." Immediately, he switched to a soothing tone, "I'm so sorry, Rika. I've just been taking your kindness for granted. Please don't be mad at me." His attempt to appease me was blatant, but it only highlighted the imbalance in our relationship. The next day, Sean, unusually, came to pick me up from my part-time job. When we got back to the apartment, he had cleaned up the place and prepared a dinner he seemed to have gotten from a department store basement food hall, complete with a bouquet, wine, and even a cake. It was the first time I felt truly touched by Sean's thoughtfulness during our long relationship. He then presented me with a ring from a popular casual brand at the time, saying, "This is all I can afford right now, but someday I'll buy you a diamond worth 3 months of my salary." I remember blurting out a cliché about being the happiest I've ever been when he put the ring on my finger. But that was the only happy memory I had. Soon after, Sean said, "I'm torn between getting a job or studying abroad. But if things stay as they are, I'll just end up relying on you again, Rika. It's a critical juncture in my life, so I want to try doing things on my own for a while." And with that, he moved out to share an apartment with friends. Left suddenly on my own, I was anxious, but Sean left some of his belongings with me and still contacted me twice a day by email or phone, so I thought, I shouldn't mope around. I need to focus on my job search too. I managed to get an offer from my first choice company, a mid-sized trading firm, but around that time, I started receiving strange calls on the landline registered in Sean's name. Naturally, I'd hear the messages left on the answering machine, with ominous words like, "We'll be in trouble if you don't repay us by this week, and don't take us lightly." I quickly contacted Sean's cell, but he just brushed it off, saying, "It's nothing, don't worry about it." Then, letters began arriving in the mail, filled with words like payment reminder and final notice. When I confronted Sean more forcefully, he snapped, saying, "Stop nagging. I've been putting up with someone as ugly and defective as you this whole time, so the least you can do is pay this off as a thank you." After that, he stopped answering my calls. Deceived by his regular contact, I realized too late that I hadn't asked for Sean's new address. When I tried contacting his university, they refused to give me any information, saying, "We can't disclose that to unrelated individuals." Desperate for any clue, I opened some of the cardboard boxes Sean had left in the apartment. Inside were documents from several finance companies hinting at debts, old clothes with no resale value, and a used, outdated laptop. There was nothing that could lead me to Sean's parents' address or his current whereabouts, making me realize I was nothing more than a source of money to him. But things got worse when, not long after losing contact with Sean, 2 men in suits showed up at my apartment, informing me that as Sean's wife and guarantor for his debts, I was expected to repay them promptly. The additional blow at a time when I hadn't even recovered from the shock of being abandoned by Sean was enough to devastate me. It was Ken and his family who rescued me from this situation. That's why I've always wanted to do everything I can for my parents and Ken. However, as I was pushing my daughter Natalie's wheelchair through the mall, I had an unexpected reunion. That was with Sean, the man who had betrayed and abandoned me 13 years ago. He looked at me and Natalie rudely, then approached with an unpleasant smile. And the first thing he said was, "Hey, ugly. Is that your kid? A defective product just like her mom." I was about to lose my temper, not just at the insult to me but to my innocent daughter, when a man stepped in between Sean and me. It was Ken, my husband. "What's wrong with my daughter?" Ken asked, his voice carrying clearly. Passers-by stopped to see what was happening. But Sean, for some reason, turned pale and didn't retort. As Natalie and I looked back and forth between Sean and Ken, Sean, unable to withstand the surrounding gazes, snapped at Ken, "This is private. It's none of your business, right?" But Ken, unflustered, replied, "I'm involved because it concerns my family. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother speaking to someone like you." Then, turning to Natalie, he said with a smile, "Mommy and Daddy have some business to take care of. Auntie will be here soon to pick you up, so why don't you go to her house first?" Hearing that, I couldn't help but exclaim, "What?" However, Natalie, who is unusually composed for her age and not easily surprised, said, "Okay. Since it's a celebration, make sure you come early." Soon after, Ken's sister, Sally, arrived with her children, and Natalie left with them, leaving the scene behind. Then, Ken, losing the initial momentum and slightly stooping towards Sean, who seemed somewhat diminished by the confrontation, pressured with a half-smile, "Let's have an adult conversation, shall we? It's best we move somewhere else rather than providing a free show for the public." Sean, not particularly short but significantly overshadowed by Ken's near 6 feet 3 inches stature, and faced with Ken's unsmiling gaze, probably thought it better than being gawked at by onlookers and surprisingly agreed to Ken's suggestion to change locations. The three of them took a taxi and arrived at the building housing Ken's office. With the push of an elevator button and a glance at the tenant directory next to it, Sean realized they were headed to a law firm, which made his complexion turn pale again. But it was too late to run away, so he reluctantly joined them in the elevator. On his supposed day off, Ken appeared with a stern face, bringing his wife, me, and a guest, which surprised the office staff. However, by the time we were escorted to the back reception room, they had regained their composure. Watching Ken's profile, I too managed to calm my nerves. The only one who remained visibly restless and uneasy was Sean. Seeing Sean state, Ken, with a sly smile, placed a stack of documents on the table after asking a staff member to bring them and casually mentioned, "It's terrifying how coincidences work, isn't it? To think we'd meet the very person involved before showing this investigation report to the chairman." Sean's complexion grew even worse upon hearing this, but I had no idea what they were talking about. Noticing my confusion, Ken began to explain to both Sean and me. The chairman he mentioned was a major client of Ken's office, the current chairman of a machine tool manufacturing company. Recently, the chairman personally summoned Ken to the company's headquarters, where he was introduced to the chairman's youngest daughter, who had just returned from studying in the United States. The chairman had a special request. He wanted an investigation into a man's background to be kept confidential. And there, in the sales department, was none other than you, right? Sean Smith? Well, you were using a different spelling for Sean back then, Ken continued with a grin, making Sean's face grow even paler. Ken went on to explain that the chairman's granddaughter, while studying in France, had formed a relationship with a man at the same graduate school, promising each other a future together. This man had dropped out of a university just before graduating and moved to France to enroll in a local university. After graduating, he worked for U.S. company's local branch but left, seeking further education in graduate school. The granddaughter, a smart woman, had fallen deeply in love with this man, who supported her through the homesickness after enrolling in a French university. Having completed her master's degree earlier than him, she returned to Japan with him and asked her grandfather, the chairman, to approve their marriage and to consider him for a position in the family-owned company. The chairman was completely unaware of this man's existence around his granddaughter in France. However, the executive director, the chairman's daughter, had met the man several times during business trips to France and had been introduced to his parents stationed there. The executive director thought it too sudden for her adult daughter to marry and immediately join the family business as a future executive. So, after a private discussion between the doting grandfather and the executive director, they discreetly commissioned Ken's law firm, which had a long-standing relationship with their family, to investigate Sean. Feeling a bad premonition, I asked, "Don't tell me, that man isn't Sean, is it?" But before Ken could answer, Sean snapped back, "What? It's a problem if it's me. We've been over for ages, and who I marry has nothing to do with you." Sure, Sean was a part of my past I'd rather forget, and I had no interest in his current affairs, but there was plenty I wanted to say to him out of spite. "Separated, yes. But right before that, you filed for our marriage without my consent, made me a guarantor for your debts, then disappeared," I shouted, and Sean seemed taken aback for a moment but quickly smirked. "You say that, but you wanted to marry me back then. I just made your dream come true, and in return, you helped a bit with my debts." Pointing at Ken, he continued, "I was worried when I had to update my passport at the embassy. But when I checked back here, I was relieved to find I was single. I never thought someone as ugly and defective as you would have someone else willing to take you in, so I was worried you might be waiting for my return." Just as I was about to lose my temper again, Ken stepped in. "I thought you had been quiet because you were reflecting, but a scumbag will always be a scumbag," he remarked, then smoothly explained how our marriage was annulled, leaving Sean officially single. It turns out, when Sean disappeared and debt collectors came for me, Ken's father, my father-in-law, was the first to offer me advice. One of my part-time jobs was tutoring, and at that time, my student was Ken's twin sister, Sally, who has now become my sister-in-law. Sally was a bright kid but had started to skip school due to being ostracized by her classmates. Hired by her concerned parents, I learned that Sally was excluded for standing up for a friend who was also being ostracized. Trying to cheer her up, I not only helped with her studies but also listened to her problems, which endeared me to her parents and grandparents, who began treating me like family. Sally happened to be visiting with her mother to share the news of her recommended admission to the college she wished for, right when the debt collectors showed up at my apartment. Shocked by my exhausted state and furious to learn about the marriage registration done without my consent and being made a guarantor for debts, she immediately contacted her father and grandfather, who brought me to this law firm. From there, my father and grandfather mobilized all their resources to resolve the situation. They started by filing for annulment due to the unauthorized marriage registration and negotiating with the financial institutions about the invalidity of me being made a guarantor against my will. It was a tough battle, but given their expertise in this field, they managed to successfully resolve both issues, I was told. Facing a lawsuit for annulment and dealing with stubborn financial institutions was a tremendous effort, especially as Sean was nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, overwhelmed by this sudden misfortune, the shock of being abandoned by Sean, and the turmoil that jeopardized my college graduation and employment offer, I worried about how I could ever afford the attorney's fees. That's when my grandfather-in-law offered me a job at this firm, where I worked diligently. I was hoping to repay them in some small way. Despite my efforts to pay the attorney's fees, the Bar Association's regulations only allowed me to cover the actual expenses with a little extra. Thanks to their efforts, the marriage was ultimately annulled, and I was also released from being Sean's guarantor for his debts. So technically, you're not Rika's ex-husband. You're just a blemish on her life, they told Sean. Still, Sean seemed unable to grasp the gravity of the situation, retorting, "Well, having a marriage history with such a woman would be boring anyway. And as for the debts, they're probably statute barred by now, so it doesn't matter." At that moment, Ken burst into laughter. Facing Sean's confused reaction, Ken retorted, "The statute of limitations hasn't kicked in. I believe you'll be seeing some collection efforts starting this coming week." Sean might have thought that after 13 years, his debts were time-barred, but thanks to my grandfather-in-law, I was removed as a guarantor. The financial institution, unable to track down Sean, devised a plan and transferred Sean's debt to a debt collection agency they had ties with. In cases like Sean's, where repayment was dodged or delayed, making the bad debt unrecoverable, financial institutions often sell these debts to debt collection agencies. These agencies, then, are professionals in collections, employing all legal means possible, thanks to their extensive knowledge of the law. The agency that purchased Sean's debt was no exception, and after proceeding with various legal steps, a court judgment initiated by the collection company has reset the statute of limitations for another 10 years, making the debt fully valid today. Moreover, the total debt, now inflated with accrued late fees and legal costs, has skyrocketed to several times the original amount. Hearing this, Sean momentarily looked disheartened but then defiantly claimed, "Ah, such trivial money. Once I marry into that company's granddaughter's family and land a job there, it'll all be manageable." Such was Sean's shallow thinking. He probably assumed that marrying into the family as planned and securing an executive position at his father-in-law's company would make the debt repayment seem trivial. However, when Ken reminded him, "Do you remember what I mentioned earlier? Who had hired me to investigate you?" Sean's face turned completely pale. The truth is, Ken is Sally's twin brother. While I had little interaction with Ken when I tutored Sally, only exchanging greetings, Ken had developed an interest in me after hearing Sally sing my praises like a sister. Eventually, as I unexpectedly started working at the office and Ken, having passed the bar exam during his university years, began working there too, he proposed to me, considering marriage. Despite my past and owing much to my grandfather-in-law and his family, I initially refused, feeling it was improper. Yet, Ken revealed he had known about Sean all along and still wished to marry me, with the full support of his parents, grandparents, and Sally. By then, my parents, fully aware of my circumstances, also blessed our union, leading to a happy marriage with Ken. Unlike me, who wanted to seal away the past, Ken had harbored a desire for revenge against Sean for years. The request from the chairman was initially thought to be a coincidence of names, but further investigation confirmed that the Sean Smith, who was the chairman's daughter's boyfriend, was indeed the same Sean Smith who had discarded me like trash. Based on that, Ken was about to submit the report first thing next week. You might have gotten away with it using different spelling overseas, but in here, it doesn't work that way. I heard the young lady noticed the difference in spelling when she saw your driver's license. You claimed it was because a fortune teller told you this version brought better luck, but in reality, you've been dodging responsibilities left and right, haven't you? After all, Sean is a very common name in the US, so you were probably planning to claim identity confusion if anything went wrong. Ken said, admonishing Sean for thinking such shallow tricks would work on a lawyer. He revealed that he had already scanned and emailed the report to the chairman and his granddaughter. Adding to that, Ken said, since then, we've occasionally received inquiries from that financial institution, checking if they had located you. I've also informed them about your situation. Sean, suddenly dropping to his knees, begged, please somehow convince the chairman and the others that it was all a mistake. But Ken, with a sarcastic tone, questioned, why should I, a lawyer, tell such blatant lies to a client, especially when you've insulted my young daughter, who is in a wheelchair because of an injury, calling her ugly and defective. The truth is, Natalie's injury happened while she was on her way to violin practice. I took my eyes off her for just a moment, and she was knocked over by a high school student distracted by their phone. Since then, Natalie has been somewhat withdrawn, worrying Sally and her kids, who, upon learning that Natalie won a prize in an art competition, suggested, let's celebrate her achievement. Today was supposed to be for that celebration, but Sean's unexpected appearance turned it into a complete disaster. Ken, utterly doting on his daughter, was undoubtedly furious not just because of Sean's past actions but also because of the vile words directed at Natalie. Even as Ken coldly dismissed him, Sean, without any shame, continued to cry out loudly, pleading, please. The future of a man's life is at stake here. Are you going to ruin it? But Ken responded, ruin someone's life? Which right do you have to say such a thing? What you tried to do to Rika and the chairman's granddaughter was exactly the act of ruining someone's life. It's like the saying, curse others and you dig two graves. A boomerang that came right back at you. You should accept it gracefully. When Sean still tried to cling to him, Ken brushed off his arm and said, the exit is that way, calling the building's security to escort Sean out with a flick of his hand. As Sean's cries and resentments faded away, Ken and I exchanged smiles. Later on, Sean rushed to his girlfriend, the chairman's granddaughter, and made excuses, but she, already harboring suspicions, was outraged by the revelation of the truth and refused to see him again, effectively giving him the boot. However, the chairman and the executive director, upset over their beloved daughter and granddaughter being hurt, took further action. Sean, attempting to reconcile and bombarding her with messages and emails, was reported to the police for suspicion of being a fraudster trying to marry and infiltrate the company with a fake resume. While it didn't escalate to a criminal case, a warning was issued for the stalking. Sean, persistent in continuing his harassment, was eventually arrested and prosecuted. Though he received a suspended sentence with probation instead of jail time, the conviction meant he could find employment nowhere, not just outside of Tokyo but across the entire country, despite superficially returning to his normal life. Finding himself in a desperate situation, Sean once again tried to go to America, hoping to find employment there, but with a criminal record, he struggled to obtain a visa and had to give up on that plan. Moreover, after learning everything from the chairman and the police, his parents disowned him, leaving Sean truly alone. Facing unavoidable debt repayment, he tried to find odd jobs, but, without a smartphone due to being blacklisted, an expired driver's license, and no fixed address, decent work was impossible to come by. I heard through the grapevine that he ended up working for a shady handyman service introduced by the debt collectors, living in a dormitory with no privacy and working from dawn till dusk. But I decided to forget about it as soon as I heard, as it had nothing to do with me. On the other hand, Ken and I moved from our suburban house to a condo near the private elementary school Natalie plans to attend, once her injury had healed. Natalie, who has been averse to taking the train since the accident, liked the bus accessibility and the view from our high-rise apartment, seeming happier every day. The previous house was a remodeled version of Ken's parents' home, so when Ken suggested selling it to move, I worried about what his parents would think. However, they, enjoying their second life in a warm seaside town, told us, the happiness of our son, his wife, and our granddaughter is what matters most. Don't worry about us. They actually encouraged us to go ahead with the move. Being closer to my workplace means more time spent with the family than before. It was a good decision, Ken, enjoying the new life as much as Natalie, said. Watching them, I've been thinking about trying something new myself. I'm Mary, 42 years old. 10 years ago, I married a man I met at work. He was divorced with a child, whom I've raised as my own while working. During this time, my husband started his own business and, despite many ups and downs, persevered as the president until the end. My stepson turned 20 this year. He left home 2 years ago to attend a university in a neighboring state and seems to be managing well living alone. But our ordinary life changed abruptly. My husband passed away. He died of a heart attack, and there was nothing that could be done. While I was overwhelmed with grief, there were countless things to take care of, including the funeral and various arrangements, and before I knew it, the day of the funeral arrived. The funeral was a small, family-only affair, as my husband wished. His parents had already passed away, and being an only child, the only family he had by blood was our son. My parents and siblings didn't get along with my husband, so we didn't invite them. It was just me and our son at the very small funeral. Before the coffin was taken away, my son came to me in the waiting room. "What's wrong?" I asked him as usual, but he didn't respond. His expression was almost blank. When I asked again, he suddenly started saying incomprehensible things. That's enough, you parasite. What? Stop clinging to Dad. You just came in later and started sucking up all his money. You fake mother parasite, just renounce your inheritance and disappear. The real family is just me. After saying that, he left the room, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed painfully in my heart. After that, we didn't talk, and as soon as the funeral was over, he went back to his dorm. I couldn't ask him what he meant by his words. I tried to contact him, but my messages were left unread, and he ignored my calls. I couldn't confirm anything, and it was already the next day. Today, I tried contacting him several times, but still no response. And with work tomorrow, it's difficult to just leave for his dorm in the neighboring state. So, I stopped by a convenience store to pick up some light food and drinks, then headed home. When I entered my apartment, I noticed a sliver of light under the door to the living room. Hesitantly, I approached and opened the door quietly. To my surprise, there was my son, sitting on the living room sofa, seemingly waiting for me. "What are you doing here?" After moving out for his dorm, my son only came home for the holidays, like Christmas and New Year's. Even during the recent wake and funeral, he didn't stop by here, he just went straight from his dorm and back. Ignoring my obvious confusion, my son confronted me in a calm voice, or rather, a slightly mocking tone. "Was something inconvenient for you? Didn't want to be seen doing whatever you please now that Dad's gone?" "What do you mean?" "Just figured you'd be living it up in your own way now that Dad's not around." "In many ways." "That's not true at all." "Yeah, whatever. Anyway, that's not important. Did you eat?" "Huh? Are you hungry?" "If you haven't eaten, I can make something simple." It was getting late. If he had been waiting in the room alone, he might be hungry. As a mother, it was natural for me to offer, but it seemed to irritate him. Suddenly, he slammed his hand on the table in front of him and glared at me with hostility. "You! Didn't I just say it?" "What? How long are you gonna keep shamelessly squatting in this house? You fake mother parasite, just renounce your inheritance and disappear. The real family is just me." The same lines, the same insults as before, came flying out from my son. What's really going on? Did something happen? "What? I only put up with you because Dad was around. Who would think of someone like you as my mother? You just leeched off Dad while he was the CEO, sucking up the sweet life. Just get lost now." I was at a loss for words. Indeed, since remarrying 10 years ago, my son hardly ever turned to me for affection. He grew up protected by his kind father, having experienced his parents' divorce at a young age. I felt that my presence had robbed him of his gentle father. So, for the past 10 years, I tried my best to raise him. I made daily lunches, took him to and from extracurricular activities, and created many family-like moments. Even during his rebellious phase, my husband struggled with all sorts of things, but we faced it together, believing it was a phase every child goes through. But it seems my efforts never reached him. My son's painful words inflicted deep damage on my heart. I painfully realized that our relationship was only possible because of the presence of my husband, his blood father, and my husband. My son, openly hostile towards me. This is probably the real face of my son. Perhaps, no matter what I say as his stepmother, it won't reach him anymore. So, I decided to at least listen to his last wish. "Yes. No matter what happens, you gotta keep living." "Absolutely." "Huh? Don't you act all high and mighty, you fake." The words from my son, filled with such intensity, felt like they were piercing through me. "What do you want? Get out of here." "What?" "This house belonged to Dad, which means it's now mine. No place for a fake family like you." "Kevin." "Shut up. Don't talk to me. Don't even say my name. I really want to tell you to get out right now. But I'm kind because you did take care of me when I was a kid. I'll give you a week's notice. This is my house, I can't live in that tiny apartment forever. Just hand over the place and get lost. The last look my son gave me left deep wounds in my heart. With that, he left for his dorm. A week later. After work, I checked my personal phone and saw an unbelievable number of missed calls and messages. Most of them were from Kevin, just as I expected. I turned off my phone for a while and headed home. After a quick dinner and a bath, I turned my phone back on after a few hours. As soon as I did, the sound of countless messages and missed call notifications wouldn't stop. I tried to go through them, and the moment I marked the messages as read, Kevin called, as if he had been waiting. Hello? Hey! What the hell do you think you're doing? Don't mess with me! I could hear my son's anger through the phone. It wasn't surprising. The first message had come in the morning. Calm down first. I can't talk to you if you don't speak properly. What? You're the one making it impossible to talk properly. What's this about the house being up for sale? So, it was about that. Not really surprising. How about we meet and talk? Where are you? Outside the house. I see. So, you saw the for sale sign and started bombarding me with calls. Makes sense. Of course. He must have been there since the morning. Well, there's nowhere else for him to be, I guess. For now, you can still get into the house. If you have the key, go in and wait. It's completely empty, though. What? The key still works? He hadn't even tried it. I suddenly remembered my husband, who had a simple and slow-witted side, just like my son Kevin. He must have tried the key after I suggested it. I could hear the sound of the door opening through the phone. He probably stepped into the entrance, relieved and slightly relaxed, judging by the deep breath I heard. Yet, he couldn't hide his emotions or embarrassment, and his voice came out harshly. Just hurry up and get here. The call abruptly ended, and I let out a heavy sigh. In the midst of my hectic daily life, having just relaxed at home, honestly, going out was a hassle. There were still a mountain of things to do. But I knew I had to have a proper conversation with my son, for various reasons. Resigned to this, I put my coat back on and headed to my former home. As I opened the unlocked door, I saw the cold hallway leading to the lit living room. Walking quietly over the chilly floor, I found Kevin sitting cross-legged in the middle of the empty living room. You're late. How long do you expect people to wait? What? I came right after the phone call ended. My stronger tone surprised Kevin a bit. But ever since we met, he was always biting back, not just at me, but also at his biological father, my husband. He wasn't going to back down now and lashed out even more. Are you kidding me? What's with the for sale sign? The house is too big for one person, so I thought about selling it. Your words helped me make up my mind. Thanks for that. The cold floor of winter was draining the warmth from my body. I turned on the air conditioner as I always did. What? You can't just sell Dad's house. Oh. But this is my house. What? This house is mine, legally in my name. What? You didn't know? Don't lie to me. How could you afford a place like this? You think I'm stupid just because I'm young? No, wasn't it you who treated me with a condescending attitude? Of course, I wouldn't say that out loud. No, it's legally in my name. I can show you the registration if you want. His real thoughts spilled out as I spoke with deliberate firmness. How can someone with no money like you afford it? You must have tricked Dad into giving you the money. Just like you wormed your way into his life for his money when he was a CEO. I knew it. Even though my husband and I tried desperately to connect, Kevin never opened up his heart. Correctly speaking, my husband became a president after we got married. But it's true Kevin probably thought some random woman was approaching his father, who could earn enough to start a company. But that doesn't change the fact that you, his son, were freely spending his money, right? What? You thought I didn't know? You sneaked into Dad's company and stole money during your middle and high school years, didn't you? Kevin's face stiffened, not expecting me to know. In reality, it was Kevin, not me, who was siphoning off his father's money. How do you know that? I didn't at first. Your father was desperately hiding it to protect you. But eventually, there were accounting issues, and when pressed, your father admitted, Kevin has been coming to the company and taking money. Dad knew? Of course he knew. How much do you think you took from Dad's company? How would I know? $400,000. What? And I think you probably took a few thousand more. Kevin probably didn't even realize he had stolen that much. Seriously? He muttered, shaking his foot slightly. No point asking what he spent it on now. By the way, aren't you wondering how I know all this? Yeah. How do you know so much about Dad's company? You must have been up to no good. The nerve of this kid, accusing me of wrongdoing. It's only natural I know. It's my company. What? That company is mine, so of course I know about it. No way. That was Dad's company. Don't tell me you took over it. I wouldn't take over such a small company that was in huge debt. Debt? Yes. Dad's company was on the brink of collapse, so we included it under our group to turn it around. That's why you could go to college and still ask Dad for money. You should be thanking me. What? Dad was indeed the president since he went independent 8 years ago. But eventually, he became an employed president under our group. Like a salaried president. Why? Like I said, the company was in huge debt and had no way out, so we took it under our wing. But why? Your father had no business acumen. He thought he could handle it even after you stole $400,000 from him. That's impossible for that company. It couldn't make up for a $400,000 loss. So, we took it under our group. Dad cut his salary to pay employees, and I paid for all our living expenses and this apartment, which I owned, to reduce the burden. As I spoke calmly, Kevin's reaction was surprisingly mild, beyond his stiffened expression. He seemed unable to keep up with the facts spilling from my mouth. What do you mean, you already owned it? Oh, I've been investing in various things since I was young. I owned several apartments, including this one, which I bought to rent out. When we were looking for a new place to live, I thought it would be suitable for our family. You own several apartments? Yes, real estate income. How did you have money to invest when you were young? Well, who are you, anyway? After living together for 10 years, he's finally asking. He always thought of me as just an ordinary office worker. Lack of interest is a scary thing. Living life ignoring what should be seen and known. Even the most important things, like your own family. My efforts at parenting were one-sided after all. It wasn't just Kevin's fault. The trauma of divorce in his early years, the appearance of a stepmother he couldn't accept, being tossed around by the whims of adults, these are undeniable facts. But neither my husband nor I could find the answer to what to do. We were either not allowed to find it, or we were not allowed to find it. Now, it's just a result. I need to explain this to Kevin too. I calmly laid out the facts to the suspicious Kevin. Do you know Turner Group? I'm the COO there. What? The Turner Group? Remember my maiden name? Ah. Right, Mary Turner. Daughter of the CEO of Turner Group, the heir to the Turner family. No way! I've never met your family. That's because your father avoided them. He didn't want to face them after running off with the heir to the Turner family, a divorced man. So, he avoided any meetings. What? And then, we had to include his failing company under our group's umbrella. Without even apologizing. That's probably why he lacked business skills. My husband indeed spent his last days running from the Turner family. My family wanted to meet him, but he never did until the end. That's why they weren't invited to the funeral. He was a kind man. Truly kind man. But that kindness also became a source of indulgence and escape. Then that means I'm the grandson of the Turner Group, right? That's true, isn't it? I expected you'd say that. That's why I never told Kevin this truth until now. I thought about telling him when he was in high school, but at that time, it wasn't something he could handle. He would definitely take advantage of the Turner name. In that sense, my husband keeping us distant from my family was a blessing in disguise. Kevin's recent words just confirmed it all. But sadly, you're not the grandson of the Turner Group. What? If you're my mother, then I'm the grandson. Even if you're a fake mother, that's what the family register says. Don't try to deceive me. Did you listen to what I said before? What? What did I say? I wonder if the son in front of me remembers. He looks confused, trying to recall, but it seems nothing came to mind. After you said, the only real family is me, I said, no matter what, you have to keep living. Absolutely. Kevin seemed to remember that, but still had a face that said, so what? Clearly, my words and intentions hadn't reached him. His expression confirmed it. You're 20 years old, you should understand the meaning, right? What? You're an adult and a college student, living a life beyond most adults, without thinking about anything? What? It's normal for parents to support while kids are students. There's no obligation to support beyond tuition and basic living expenses. What? Parents don't have to pay for your leisure and luxury. At my words, Kevin quickly hid his expensive-looking watch. Surely, there are many other things he obtained with the over $400,000 he used. For a student who doesn't work, they're all disproportionate. Such disproportionate armor is fragile and protects nothing. You're okay with your child being homeless? I don't mind. It's none of my concern anymore. What? You're no longer my concern. Kevin looked at me, his face saying he didn't understand. I've never really understood you, Kevin. From the day your father brought you until today, I couldn't strip away that inappropriate, fragile armor with a direct approach. Your father has passed away. So, we're no longer parent and child. What? I divorced your father after his death, and my last name is back to Turner. You and I are now complete strangers. Well, we've always been strangers, actually. Why would you do something like that? Why? You said it yourself. The only real family is you. You never thought of me as family from the start. It worked out perfectly. That's not true. What am I supposed to do without parent? I wasn't your family, remember? You said it yourself. But you should have consulted me. Consult? To someone who never listened even when I tried to connect? To someone who left and never came back, doing whatever he pleased? Besides, we're not family, so why should I consult you? I smiled sweetly at Kevin, his face turning red and his body trembling. It might be immature. But after these 10 years of looking at him as family, maintaining this relationship of stepmother and child seemed too hard. Suffering under a kind yet indulgent husband and a son who wouldn't accept me as family. I've grown tired over these 10 years. What about college and a place to live? Didn't I already point that out? What? No matter what happens, carry on. Absolutely. You demanded that I renounce my inheritance, so you must have thought about it, right? What? The inheritance. What happened to it? Sadly, your father left debts. Consumer loans, credit card loans, about $600,000. And no savings. What? Debts and no savings? Of course, as you demanded, I renounced the inheritance, so all the dead inheritance goes to you. Good luck. What? I'm not inheriting any debts. Why are there debts and no savings? Because you stole from his company, remember? What? I said earlier, besides that $400,000, and there were probably more. Kevin nodded slightly. That was probably used to cover the hole in your father's savings and debts. What? Probably at first, he was trying to cover it up without creating a hole in the company's funds. The company had just started, and there wasn't much savings. Once that ran out, and he couldn't borrow anymore, he struggled for years, trying to deceive, and eventually came crying to me. You had already consumed what should have been your father's inheritance. It's your own doing, isn't it? I wonder if my words reached him. His eyes bloodshot and round, Kevin mutters to himself, exuding an aura of despair. How much is the debt? It was less than $100,000, I think. $100,000? Kevin sat down, holding his head. I'll give you a hint, though. A hint? A hint that might help you survive. What is it? Tell me, quickly. You know, you're asking for a favor. Maybe think about how you ask? Sorry, please tell me. Like I did, you can renounce the inheritance too. Really? His face brightened up, persistently asking how to do it. You can do the procedure yourself if you look it up. Besides, you're a law student, right? Oh wait, you barely got into a decent private university with a recommendation from a low-ranking high school and you're struggling to pass, right? You're technically a junior but haven't even earned 40 credits yet? It makes sense you don't know. I hit a sore spot and he looked down, biting his lip. He might think of me as a mean adult, but it's intentional. He probably hasn't been attending school properly. Less than 40 credits in 3 years. It'll take at least 3 more years to graduate, right? That means 2 more years of tuition. It's far beyond what he could possibly afford to pay. There's some life insurance in your name from your father. Really? It's only $60,000. Seeing Kevin's reaction, as if he wanted to exclaim, "Is that all?" I mentioned that it's also due to his actions that there wasn't more money for insurance, causing him to make an uncomfortable face. And you know, there might be taxes on the insurance money, so look into that. What? Taxes on insurance money? You're an adult, so maybe look it up? Even after taxes, it should be enough to set up a room and live for a while. If you want to continue college, apply for scholarships. Wait, set up a room? What do you mean? The apartment you're living in now. I'm canceling it at the end of this month. What? Why? It's rented under my name. I have no obligation to keep renting and paying for someone who's not my child. Can't you give me like a month's notice? What? You only gave me a week's notice. You have 3 more weeks. You're 20, an adult. You can rent a room and do anything. I'm just following through on your words. Take responsibility for what you said. This can't be happening. He looked to Pirate. But from my perspective, there's much more he could do. I wish he'd realized this. First off, why not sell those inappropriate branded items for cash? What? Like that watch you're wearing, and that bag. Do you really need them right now? I want him to think and struggle to find answers. Kevin, who has grown up indulged in his father's unconditional kindness since his mother wasn't around. He might have been awkwardly showing his neediness to me too. But there's a difference between acceptable neediness and harmful self-indulgence. Actions that hurt others and change lives are not neediness but mere selfishness. It's clear that a 20-year-old adult like him will struggle in life if this continues. I don't hate Kevin. In fact, I still think of him as my dear son. That's why I cut ties with him with the greatest love I could offer. He needs to strive on his own now. I left an envelope with necessary documents in front of the still stunned Kevin. I'm sure he will understand. With that hope, I softly stroked his hair for the first time in years and quietly left the former home. 3 years have passed since my husband's death. Every year on his anniversary, I visit his grave and update him. There, I always find beautiful blue gentians laid out. The person who offers flowers to my husband, who had no siblings or parents. I'm sure it must be the person I have in mind. The meaning of the gentian flower is consoling sorrow. Blue gentians symbolize sincerity. The same color as my husband's favorite tie. It's out of season to get these flowers now. I wonder what he thinks and where he gets them. Every year, I lay white gentians next to the blue ones. Their meaning is sincere character. Like my straightforward, kind husband, watching over Kevin from afar. After finishing my visit, I returned to the office. Even now, after 3 years, I continue my daily life as the COO of Turner Group. COO, please check this. What's this? It's the list of new employees joining our group companies next year. Oh, it's already that time of year, isn't it? Every year around this time, the list of new employees joining the group companies is brought to me. With so many companies, the list is quite long, but it's my personal wish to remember the faces and names of the young people who will be working with us. As I was flipping through the list handed over by my secretary, I came across the list from the company where my husband used to be the president. The current president of that company is really unique and capable, isn't he? You knew him from college, right? The secretary approached with a mug of coffee. Its gentle aroma tickled my nose. Yes, he's been a friend since college. He did great in another company, so I lured him over to lead. It was a great success. The company has shown significant growth since then. After my husband's sudden passing, I had to look for a new president. Given the tough business conditions, it was hard to find suitable staff. That meant there was no one suitable within the company either, leading to a tough situation. So I managed to persuade a friend of mine, who had joined a venture company with only a few employees, to join as the new president, and had grown the company to a scale of 100 employees. The existing employees were initially puzzled by the completely different approach of the new president. However, his personality and power led the team, and he continues to elevate the company. I was curious about the new employees he had chosen. As I flipped through the list, I saw a familiar face. It was Kevin. What's this about? I called my friend immediately. Hello. Hey, I didn't hear about this. About what? The new employees starting in April. Oh, were you surprised? He seemed to know what I was talking about. Surprised? Why is he there? Why? Because he's interesting. What? He is quite interesting. His life until 3 years ago was quite heavy, but these last 3 years have amplified his character. I have only high expectations. Listening to my friend, I stared at Kevin's photo on the list. His face had changed significantly, looking much more mature. The expression he had when I last stroked his hair was nowhere to be seen. Okay. Take care of him. Like you have to tell me. The call was abruptly ended. Even though he says that, I know he's watching over Kevin. That's good. I thought to myself, feeling relieved. I might never meet Kevin directly, but I'm sure I'll hear about him often. I can't feel the softness of his hair, but I gently stroke his photo on the paper and smile softly. Just as construction began on our new home, my husband lost his job. He had promised to pay half of the mortgage even if he had to work part-time, but he couldn't find another job and didn't even work part-time. When our new home was completed, he suddenly came up with a ridiculous idea. I've decided to give this house as a wedding present to my adorable niece. We can always buy another house. If you disagree with me, let's get divorced right away. Huh? What does he mean? I was shocked, but I knew his secret, so I was ready to happily agree to a divorce if that's what he wanted. Smugly thinking he had his way, my husband quickly filed for divorce. Then he started asking about the division of property. When I threatened to reveal his secret, his attitude changed dramatically. With the help of a certain person, his plan took an unexpected turn, leading to an unbelievable situation. We had been married for 3 years. Next year, I will turn 30, and my husband, Daniel, will be in his mid-30s. We discussed whether to have children. Bearing a child requires physical strength, and one cannot always maintain their current health. I wanted to have a child before my mid-30s and discussed this with Daniel. If he felt it was unnecessary to force ourselves to have a child, I was okay with that. However, Daniel said he also wanted a child, but our current home was too small for a family. He suggested considering buying our own home. Raising a child and owning a home would cost a lot, not to mention a mortgage of nearly 30 years. By then, Daniel would be in his mid-60s, likely retiring. I didn't want our child to struggle because of a mortgage. My mother worked full-time while raising me and doing household chores. She worked until retirement, supporting my father and me. I always respected her and decided to work while maintaining a household. With this in mind, I was determined to realistically plan for our own home. We chose a builder and our home plan was on track. Fortunately, we had savings, so we decided to pay a large down payment to reduce future mortgage troubles. Just as things were coming together, Daniel's company went bankrupt, and he lost his job without any severance pay. I asked if there were any signs of the company failing, but he snapped back, saying he couldn't have known as he wasn't a senior executive. One morning, he went to work only to find the office closed with a notice. It said the company had gone bankrupt the day before. It was a small company, and apparently, the executives had fled in the night, leaving no severance pay or salary for that month. I suggested putting the house plan on hold, considering our uncertain future. However, Daniel insisted we continue since we had already made plans. He promised to find a new job without being picky and convinced me to put the plan on hold temporarily. I thought he would find a job quickly if he wasn't choosy. I decided to continue with our plan once he secured employment. Daniel started visiting the employment office and searching for jobs online. He even found a temporary part-time job, although it was on a call-in basis. Even so, it was a temp job on a call-in basis, so he never knew when he'd be working. His actions and commitment to pay the mortgage together made me feel his determination. Since my income was stable and we could manage without his help for the time being, I decided to go ahead with our house plan. Up to this point, you might think Daniel was a very sincere husband. However, he had an odd obsession. Daniel has an older sister, who had a child, Mia, at a young age. Becoming an uncle at a young age, Daniel adored Mia immensely. My sister-in-law lived far away due to my brother-in-law's job transfer, so we didn't see them often. But my husband, Daniel, would send gifts and a lot of cash to his niece, for allowance or as Christmas gift, sometimes 5 times the usual amount. I even opposed him once when he wanted to give $2,000 for Christmas gift, arguing it was too much even for his beloved niece. When sending gifts to his niece, who lives far away, we usually mail them. But after Daniel reported spending money to send something to her, I never heard any word of thanks from my sister-in-law, which was frustrating. I questioned my husband's nerve when I heard that he had given his niece an expensive gift without regard for the family budget, even when unplanned expenses came up at one point. Since then, I've often been frustrated with his excessive fondness for his niece. Now that Daniel is unemployed, thankfully, he doesn't seem to be dipping into our savings for his niece's sake. However, his time away from home, supposedly job hunting, has significantly increased. In fact, he leaves the house earlier and returns later than he did when he was working. I wondered if job centers were open that late. He said he was attending information sessions and networking. It's great he's eager about job hunting, but he's been careless about our new home construction, leaving everything to me. He arrogantly told me to handle all the paperwork, though he wanted his name on the deed. I gently reminded him to show some interest in our home. He sighed, saying he was too tired from job hunting and asked me to handle it. I was tired too, juggling work, the new home, and household chores, so I didn't argue to avoid a fight. Later, I worried he might say I should pay the mortgage since I made all the decisions. When I brought up the mortgage payments, Daniel said he didn't want to dip into his personal savings until he found a job. He said it was to avoid burdening me, but I thought we should focus on the present rather than potential emergencies. Despite my explanations, Daniel insisted on not using his savings and wanted me to handle the mortgage for now. Since his suggestion was too convenient for him and differed from our original agreement, I asked him to sign a loan agreement, acknowledging he was borrowing money from me for his share of the mortgage during this period. He complained but reluctantly agreed, fearing I might probe deeper into his job hunting progress. In response, Daniel continued to complain, but he reluctantly accepted, perhaps realizing that it would be troublesome if I started probing into his job hunting situation. We agreed that he would repay half of the mortgage payments I made during this period once he was reemployed. I got his signature and stored the document where he wouldn't find it. Despite our initial agreement, there were several instances of him failing to uphold his promises. Daniel said he'd find a job quickly without being picky, but he hadn't reemployed as our new home neared completion. He even turned down a few temp job offers, making excuses. I didn't want to support a husband who made no effort to find work. Our arguments increased as I urged him to find a job. In the meantime, the new house was finally finished and ready to move into. But living with him, let alone moving, seemed difficult under the current circumstances. I had gathered various information since Daniel was laid off. There are many things I want to confirm and say, including the fact that he still hasn't found a job. As usual, I called out to Daniel as he was leaving for the job center. I asked him to spend the day with me, saying we needed to have a serious talk. He tried to escape, prioritizing job hunting and suggesting we talk another day. I insisted, saying missing one day at the job center wouldn't be a problem. Then, he said something shocking. Nagging women aren't attractive, you know? What? Actually, I have something to tell you too. I thought I'd wait, but it's good news, so why not now? My niece is getting married. So, I've decided to give her our new house as a present. Let's split the mortgage and keep paying as we are. What? I was already appalled by his excessive love and financial sense towards his niece, but gifting her a whole house? Why would he make such a big decision without telling me? Hearing about his niece getting married was news to me. I couldn't believe he thought he could go through with such a plan without discussing it with me. When I pressed him, Daniel suggested divorce if I didn't like it. He was the one who initiated the house building while unemployed and not making any progress. Yet, he kept making uncertain promises about work. His plausible words didn't match his actions. I was so astounded by his behavior that I laughed. That's why I wasn't surprised when he made the absurd suggestion to gift our house to his niece. It must be related to that issue. Despite my curiosity about his response, I bombarded him with questions. Are you serious? You're unemployed, and you want to gift a house with a remaining mortgage to your niece? Do you think she would be happy with that? I wondered how he could think of giving away a house we're paying a 30-year mortgage on. It's not a good omen to gift a house with an unpaid mortgage. It's like sending troubles. I also pressed him about his plans for having children since we bought the house for our expanding family. Daniel responded defiantly to my questions. He said he doesn't mind getting divorce. He used the threat of divorce to avoid discussing his thoughts. It was as if we weren't even the same people anymore. Our conversation just wasn't working. I had a lot to discuss, but it seemed he was far more unreasonable than I thought. I had already planned to initiate divorce, so I easily accepted his suggestion. I told him I was fine with divorcing and leaving the house, as long as he listened to my demands. Daniel agreed to follow my instructions if I allowed the divorce and left the house. So, I said it's okay to file for divorce first, but I wanted to settle the property division after it was official. I also told him that I needed to hurry with my preparations to live alone, so I asked him to wait until things settled down. Daniel agreed to follow my lead if he could file for divorce immediately. In truth, I wanted time to prepare for something important without him knowing. I said this to buy myself time to prepare for living alone without him finding out. After the divorce and finishing what I needed, I was waiting for the right time to contact Daniel. Then, either out of impatience or realization, he contacted me first. What's going on? Why is our new house listed for sale? It's supposed to be a gift for my niece, and it's our joint property. If you do something like this without my consent, I won't pay the mortgage." Then, Daniel called, complaining about me selling our jointly owned house without telling him. He was furious and wouldn't listen to me. I waited for him to calm down before responding. "I knew you were trying to push the payments onto me. Did you really think it was still in joint names? You were so confident about divorce, I made sure to check everything before agreeing." When he asked to keep it in joint names, it indeed was. But, feeling distrustful towards my husband who was somehow making excuses to push the mortgage payments onto me alone, I suspected that eventually, he would refuse to pay any money at all, claiming the house as his own. So I changed the ownership. As expected, when the house was completed, Daniel started acting strangely. He insisted on gifting the house to his niece, believing his true intentions were still hidden. So, I paid off the mortgage in full with all my assets. Actually, when my parents learned we were building a house, they sold some land inherited from my grandfather and gave me the cash, advising me to use it for the payment. My parents always believed in paying for expensive items in full. My parents always said it wasn't wise to easily commit to a mortgage, given its uncertain future. That's why, when we were building our house, they provided financial assistance so we could pay in full without a loan. I could have followed my parents' advice, but just as I was about to discuss this, Daniel lost his job. I thought if he knew about this money, he would become even more irresponsible, so I kept quiet. Also, if I paid in full, I felt Daniel, with his attitude, would likely never repay me. I didn't want to trample on my parents' kindness by revealing this. Daniel was furious when he found out I had changed the house's ownership without his knowledge. He accused me of breaking our promise to keep the house. The house is still there, isn't it? It's not demolished, it's perfectly habitable. It's still existing, even if in someone else's hands, so you have no grounds to complain. If you really want it, you can buy it back. It's my prerogative what I do with the house I paid for in full. Of course, I could have chosen to live in that house. But living in a home planned with my estranged husband felt wrong. When Daniel realized I had sold the house, he angrily said I shouldn't make excuses. He then started insisting he had a right to part of the money from the sale as it was marital property. He demanded an immediate partial payment, saying we'd settle the exact amount later. I told him we should meet to discuss this and other matters. I arrived at the designated place first and waited for Daniel. Shortly after, when Daniel arrived at the designated place, he was about to say something upon seeing me. I showed him something before he could speak, and he was stunned into silence and looked at it carefully. What I showed him was the result of a private investigator's surveillance. It revealed his infidelity. There were enlarged photos of him kissing another woman on the street. There were photos of him dining at fancy restaurants and entering a hotel. According to the report, Daniel did job hunt for a few days after losing his job, but people around his mistress said they met around the time our house construction began, and they were seeing each other almost daily. Daniel had been playing the sympathy card with her from the start, claiming to be single and considering marriage, but struggling to find a job due to the recession. He wasn't just seeking sympathy, he was financially exploiting her, asking for money and gifts under the pretense of marriage. His actions, demanding money and gifts under the pretense of marriage, were akin to those of a marriage scammer. Knowing this made me feel sick. His sudden insistence on divorce seemed like he had had enough of everything. My talks about the mortgage, his uncooperative attitude, he probably got tired every time I brought these up. It seemed he planned to switch to his mistress, who was more sympathetic and compliant than me. The story about gifting the house to his niece was just an excuse to get a divorce. I realized his intention to use my refusal as a reason for divorce right away. He thought he was manipulating me, but in reality, I was the one in control. I had hired a private investigator when I noticed Daniel's strange behavior and knew about his affair. The excuse about gifting the house was unexpected, but I had already decided on divorce once I learned of his infidelity. What I wanted to discuss before moving into the new house was this matter. Initially, I planned to confront him about the affair and proceed with the divorce, but seeing his irrational behavior made me realize he was not someone I could reason with. So, I decided to let him think he had his way while I strategized in the background. Holding all the evidence, I confronted him. I have solid evidence of your affair. You can't escape this. I will demand alimony from you. You knew and kept quiet? What kind of woman stays silent knowing her husband is cheating? You're no good. Loving? You were the one betraying me, weren't you? When Daniel started talking about being a loving husband, I couldn't help but burst into derisive laughter. As I countered his statement, he hesitated for a moment, then as if struck by a brilliant idea, he again insisted on his right to property division. At that point, I made a call to my father-in-law as my final card. I informed him that Daniel was demanding a share of the property. Daniel started to rant about why I needed to involve his father, but he stopped abruptly when I told him his father wanted to speak with him. I put the phone on speaker, and Daniel heard every word of his father's scolding. His father berated him for his behavior, asking what a man over 30 was doing, and whether he wasn't embarrassed by his infidelity and the ensuing family breakdown. Furthermore, he ridiculed the idea of Daniel asking for property division after causing such chaos. Daniel has always had a bad relationship with his father-in-law, unable to defy him since childhood. His father-in-law detests dishonesty and particularly loathes those who harm or deceive others. After Daniel brought up divorce, I first consulted with my father-in-law. I asked for help only if I couldn't resolve things myself. My father-in-law assured me he would deal with Daniel, who had strayed into infidelity. I had many things to say to Daniel, who had betrayed me. If my father-in-law intervened too soon, Daniel might have fled. So, I kept silent about consulting with him. Part of the reason I wanted to delay things after the divorce was to arrange a meeting with my father-in-law without Daniel knowing. I also needed to ensure that Daniel didn't find out about the sale of the house. Additionally, I wanted to clarify Daniel's relationship with his niece. I called his sister in front of his father and asked her if his niece had ever received expensive gifts, allowances, or holiday money from Daniel. His niece said she had never received anything substantial from Daniel. His sister even mentioned that when his niece was young, Daniel attended her birthday parties without bringing any gifts. He gave only a cheap birthday card. I also asked about his niece's supposed marriage plans. It turns out that his niece, whom he claimed to be dating, had no plans for marriage, and she was puzzled about where the story even originated. She had never expressed a desire for a house, and in fact, would find it burdensome and troubling if offered. Both my sister-in-law and father-in-law were surprised to hear about Daniel's alleged fondness for his niece. So, where did all the money Daniel claimed to spend on his niece go? His sister then provided valuable information. When Daniel was around 20, his father was away on a work assignment. And Daniel got caught up in a police raid at an illegal casino. Daniel was terrified of his father finding out about his encounter with the police. Daniel begged his mother, who picked him up from the police, to keep it a secret. Under the condition of full confession, it came out that Daniel had been taking valuables from the family storage to fund his gambling addiction. Although he had promised to quit, his gambling seemed pathological, and it was doubtful he had stopped. Hearing this, my father-in-law checked the storage against the inventory and found several items missing. He confronted Daniel about his gambling, accusing him of using his niece as a cover for his addiction. "You're still gambling, using your niece as a cover, aren't you? It's quite a position for an unemployed man to be gambling. The money from the property division isn't for your bets." He ordered Daniel to return home for a serious talk, saying he would set him straight. Unable to defy his father, Daniel turned pale, despairing, and conceded he didn't need the property division and would pay alimony. Afterwards, I received the official documents prepared by the lawyer my father-in-law had arranged for me, stating that Daniel had renounced his claim to the property division. I gained all the shared assets. Additionally, through my father-in-law's consideration, I received a larger-than-average lump sum of alimony from Daniel. At one point, I admittedly felt anger towards Daniel's mistress. However, my feelings changed when I investigated her during the process of Daniel's infidelity investigation. She believed Daniel was single and struggling financially and had been giving him money despite her own tight financial situation. I realized she was also a victim, used by Daniel. Even though she was deceived, she tearfully apologized for disrupting my family. And she offered to pay me compensation, though it was a small amount. I declined her money, appreciating her gesture enough. I also advised her that she could likely claim alimony from Daniel. I told his promises of marriage and demanding gifts and money amounted to fraud, and then she promptly took action upon this advice. When she confronted Daniel at his parents' house, accusing him of deception for marriage, my father-in-law became furiously angry. He told her she could file a police report and instructed Daniel to turn himself in immediately, causing a huge commotion. Daniel begged for mercy from both his mistress and father-in-law, promising to repay all the money he had swindled from her. Daniel used up all of his meager savings to pay off the mistress's alimony and reimburse her for the gifts, leaving him completely broke. My recently retired father-in-law, having plenty of time, closely monitored Daniel. The supervision was so strict that he even followed Daniel to the bathroom and scheduled every minute of his day. Daniel was taken to the job center under his father's escort and was constantly pressured to find a job quickly. Unable to endure this prison-like existence at home, Daniel attempted to escape while his father was asleep. Desperate and penniless, he couldn't bear the hunger and returned to his father-in-law's house within 2 days. Following this, his father, disappointed and exasperated, disowned Daniel for lacking backbone, whether in staying home or fleeing. Daniel, left with nothing but the clothes on his back, broke into his parents' storeroom in desperation, repeating his past actions of stealing valuable antiques. However, his father, aware of Daniel's past thefts from the storeroom, had now secured it properly. The installation of security cameras and a contract with a security firm meant that Daniel was quickly caught and faced the police for the second time. With his mother no longer alive to help, and his sister furious about using her daughter as a pretext, no one was willing to bail him out. My father-in-law refused to take him back, suggesting he must learn his lesson in jail. Of course, I refused to help, stating that he was now a stranger to me. As for me, with the house sold and the money in hand, I'm considering investing in some much-needed personal rejuvenation. I've rented a top-floor apartment in a building I've always wanted to live in. Now, I plan to enjoy the view, savor delicious food, and take some time to care for myself after these tumultuous years with Daniel. I was told by my son, Henry, that his spouse, Michelle, cheated on him and even had a child with another man. I can't forgive her for cheating and tricking me like this. I'm gonna get a divorce. A month after he declared this, I got a call. Hi, Susie, it's been a while. I'm getting discharged from the hospital tomorrow and will be coming over. Michelle's innocent voice came through the phone. I couldn't understand what she was talking about. Huh? Aren't you and Henry divorced? What? Divorced? Me and Henry? Oh, come on, Susie, stop joking around. That's not true. From her words, it didn't seem like Michelle was lying. But of course, I couldn't just take her word for it. Suspicious, I decided to confront Henry, who was relaxing at home. Henry, I just got a call from Michelle, and what she's saying is completely different from what you told me. Upon hearing this, Henry started to tremble and clammed up. My husband, Ken, who was watching the situation, thought it was odd and grabbed his baseball bat, slamming it down on the table. Thinking he was about to get hit, Henry finally started talking. Wait, please. Don't hit me. I'll tell you everything, I promise. I'm Susie. My husband Ken is a retired police officer, and now it's just the two of us living together. Our son, Henry, lives independently and works as a freelancer using social media. I'm not too familiar with that field, but it seems he makes a living through his illustrations. He's quite well reputed and has even been interviewed on TV. Ken, having been a cop, initially didn't understand Henry's line of work. But now, he seems to have come around to accepting it. Since retiring, Ken has mellowed out and helps around the house, something he never had time for before. We live in a house with a garden, and I was looking forward to gardening with Ken. Then, on a sunny day, as we were tending to the garden, Henry suddenly showed up. Ken and I stopped our work in surprise. "Henry, this is unexpected." Henry was grinning. "I just heard you guys having fun and wanted to check it out." "What's with that grin? Got a problem?" Ken seemed a bit embarrassed. He scowled and silently resumed weeding. "Don't be like that. So, what brings you here?" "Well, I have some important news." Suddenly, Henry's expression turned serious, making me brace myself for what was to come. "Well, it's not ideal to talk while standing, so please have a seat," I suggested. Henry and I sat side by side on a small bench in the garden. Ken seemed concerned but chose not to join in the conversation, busily continuing to pull weeds. "I'm thinking of getting married." "Really? Congratulations!" I was genuinely happy for Henry's marriage. Ken, clearly surprised, stood up to look at us. "So, who is she?" Henry grinned again. "Her name's Michelle. And she's actually outside our house right now." "What? Huh?" Ken and I exclaimed in unison. This was too sudden, and I wasn't prepared at all. "Hold on. I can't meet her without even putting on makeup." "It's fine. Being natural is best. Michelle is a good person, no worries. I'll go call her." Watching Henry go to call Michelle, I sighed. Looking at Ken, he seemed just as incredulous, shaking his head at me. "Well, that's just like them. Always like this. What a predicament." "Well, it can't be helped. It'd leave a bad impression to send her away after bringing her here." Soon, Michelle arrived, led by Henry. Under the afternoon sun, she looked radiant. Her clothes and mannerisms were charming, and she seemed well-raised. I felt embarrassed about my own attire, impressed as I was by Michelle. "Mom, Dad, let me introduce you. This is Michelle." "Nice to meet you. I'm Michelle, Henry's girlfriend." "Thank you for coming here. Normally, we should have greeted you properly inside, not out here in the garden." "Oh, that's all right. What a lovely garden you have. So many beautiful flowers. May I help out sometime?" Michelle's eyes sparkled. Her childlike, innocent smile made me happy too. Ken also looked pleased. "Well, Henry's really lucky to have you. He might not be perfect, but please take good care of him. I also ask you to take care of him. But Henry, next time, make sure to tell us in advance." I chided. Henry sheepishly scratched the back of his head. Actually, Michelle was only free today, and she thought it'd make things tense if we called ahead. He explained. Michelle shot Henry a look of mild disapproval. "Well, that's all right. Let's go inside for some coffee." "Sorry, we have another appointment after this. We'll let you know once we set a date for the wedding." With that, the two of them left us standing in the garden. It all happened so fast, it felt like a daydream. "What just happened?" "It's fine. Times are different from when we were young. They're both responsible adults, so it'll be all right." "I guess so." Despite my worries, Henry and Michelle got married without a hitch. They seemed to be doing well even after their marriage. Living not too far from us, Michelle would come to help us out whenever she had time. We'd chat and garden together, and she'd ask to learn my recipes. Ken and I grew quite fond of her, always looking out for her. There didn't seem to be any mother-in-law and daughter-in-law issues, and our relationship was very good. However, Michelle seemed tired. Dark circles under her eyes and slightly hollowed cheeks. One day, while eating snacks, I decided to ask her. "Michelle, you seem tired lately. I'm worried." "I've been busy with work." Michelle was hiding something. I could feel it. Ken sensed it too and spoke gently. "Michelle, don't hesitate to talk to us. We're family. It's only right to share concerns. Michelle remained silent for a while, munching on her snacks. Then, tears started to fall from her big eyes. Actually, Henry hardly helps with any housework. I understand we're both busy with work, but it's really tough when he doesn't do anything. With that, she bowed her head, her shoulders shaking. She was too sincere to complain about Henry to us, probably bottling it all up. I hugged her gently and whispered, "I'm glad you spoke up. We'll talk to Henry, don't worry. We're on your side, Michelle." "Thank you." I immediately scolded Henry over the phone. He fumbled for words, making excuses about being busy at work. Cut it out. Being busy is no excuse. Marriage is about supporting each other. I understand. Henry seemed to take it to heart, and it looked like Michelle's burden was lightened. Seeing her cheerful again, I felt relieved. She's such a good person, Henry should be working hard to make her happy. A few years later, in the spring, Michelle told us she was pregnant. My husband and I were thrilled at the prospect of seeing our first grandchild, but things didn't go smoothly. Michelle suddenly fell ill and, after being examined at the hospital, was found to be in a critical condition. She was diagnosed with preterm labor and had to be hospitalized. We prayed desperately for a safe delivery. Thankfully, our prayers were answered, and Michelle gave birth safely. She had no postpartum issues, but to be cautious, she stayed in the hospital for a while and planned to spend some time at our house after being discharged. I was eager to see my grandchild, but I knew Michelle's health wasn't fully recovered. About a month after, we had only made congratulatory phone calls. On a rainy day when we weren't gardening, Ken and I were watching TV. Suddenly, Henry came to our house and burst into the living room, crying out loud, "Dad, Mom, I can't stay with Michelle anymore." We were both so shocked we couldn't say anything. "What do you mean? You just had a child. Why would you say that?" "Exactly. Start explaining." Sniffling, Henry pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket and placed it on the table. "Michelle's been acting weird for a while. She said she was visiting my parents, but she wasn't really coming here. She's been cheating." Ken and I exchanged looks of disbelief. We knew she visited us often, so Henry's words seemed hard to believe. "I know I've done wrong too, but after Mom scolded me, I seriously reflected on my actions. And yet, Michelle went and had a child." "Wait, so the child Michelle gave birth to?" Henry slammed his hand on the paper on the table. "It's not mine. The DNA test showed no parental relation. This is the report. Can you believe it? She tricked me, acting all innocent." Henry ranted, his anger seemingly uncontainable. Rainwater from his clothes splattered on the table and floor. I picked up the report and tried to read it, but the ink had blurred due to the rain. The report clearly stated there was no parental relation. Ken also looked at the report in disbelief. I didn't want to believe that Michelle cheated and tricked him. We had built such a good relationship with her, and I couldn't imagine her doing such a thing behind that demeanor. Ken felt the same and was visibly confused. "Can we trust this report? Shouldn't we investigate more?" I already confronted her. Her attitude changed completely. She insulted me, calling me a convenient ATM. "I can't believe that. It's true. Not just Michelle, her family blames me too. That's why freelancing is no good, they say. I reached my limit, that's why I came here." "So, what do you want to do?" "I'm cutting ties with Michelle. I don't want anything to do with her family either." "You mean divorce?" "Yes. I have all the evidence. I'm not at fault." Henry seemed to have made up his mind. The situation had progressed so far, there wasn't much we could do, but I wished I could talk to Michelle one more time. "All right, we'll be prepared for that." "Thanks, Mom. It means a lot. But don't contact Michelle or her family. I'll handle everything. If that's what you've decided, do as you wish. But please, no trouble with the police. I know. I'll be going now. Henry picked up the report, stuffed it in his pocket, and left quickly. After that, we went through some gloomy days. There would be no more Michelle helping in the garden, no more requests to teach her cooking, no seeing our grandchild. It was a saddening thought. I thought we were starting a more joyous chapter in our lives, but this felt lonely. Ken didn't say it, but he seemed lonely too, quietly weeding the garden. Then, one day, about a month into this somber routine, we got a phone call. Hello, this is Susie. Oh, hi Susie. It's been a while. I'm feeling much better and will be discharged from the hospital tomorrow. I'll be heading your way with the baby, so please be ready. Michelle's innocent voice came through. I couldn't understand what she was talking about. Huh? Aren't you and Henry divorced? What? Divorced? Me and Henry? Oh, come on, Susie, stop joking. That's not possible. I was utterly confused and explained to Michelle what Henry had said. At first, Michelle was incredulous, but she got seriously angry when I mentioned the trickery accusation. That's just ridiculous. Henry was the one who restricted me, saying not to meet other men. I followed that rule, and now he accuses me of cheating? Unforgivable. From her words, it didn't seem like Michelle was lying. But of course, I couldn't just take her word for it. Okay, I understand. Henry is actually at home now. I'll talk to him. Please do. Right after I hung up the phone, Ken came back from the garden. What's going on? A little issue. Is Henry in his room? I think so. I heard some talking. I immediately entered Henry's room. He was on a call on his computer, but quickly shut the screen off as I walked in. What the? At least knock before you enter. Sorry. I made some coffee. Wanna have some? Henry seemed to sense something was off, but followed me to the living room without protest. However, there was no coffee there. Hey, there's nothing here. Just sit down. I sat Henry on the sofa and explained my phone conversation with Michelle. Henry started shaking as he listened. He refused to respond to any further questions. Ken, sensing something was off, picked up a baseball bat and slammed it on the table. Henry! Speak up. We can't understand if you stay silent. Deny it if it's not true. Henry remained silent, so Ken raised the bat as if to hit him. Thinking he was going to be hit, Henry finally spoke. Wait! Don't hit me! I'll tell you everything! Please! Hearing this, Ken lowered the bat. All right, speak up. Henry finally confessed. Michelle and I haven't been getting along. I got tempted and cheated with another woman. So, you're the one in the wrong. I'm not to blame. Michelle ignored me, always paying more attention to you and Mom. I hated that. Ken was furious with Henry's excuses. That's ridiculous. You're the one who cheated. What happened to the other woman? Well, she got pregnant. But it's not like I wanted to get her pregnant. It just happened naturally. Ken, seeing no remorse in Henry, hit him with the bat. You fool! Do you understand what it means to have a child? What have you learned in your life? Henry, crying from the hit, lashed out at Ken. Shut up! You're also to blame. Always acting so high and mighty. Always criticizing everything I do. I'm fed up. So you deceived us because you didn't want to be scolded? Yes. I planned the pregnancy dates so it wouldn't seem odd. If things had gone well, I could have pinned it all on Michelle and left her. Henry, defiant, revealed all his actions. Go ahead, hit me. I'll report it to the police. I'll even post it online. Former cop abuses son. It'll make a good story. You can't be serious. But it's true. That's how things work now. You and Mom are just outdated. Please just stop interfering in my life. Threatened with police action, Ken was unable to do anything.
Even so, you're the one who lied. How are you going to explain that?
Henry no longer listened to me.
Mom, can you just be quiet? If you make too much noise, I'll expose it all online.
But I wasn't afraid, no matter what he said. It was clear that what Henry did was unforgivable, regardless of the era. And it was our duty as parents to teach him that.
Well, then. If that's how it is. That's right. Keep quiet, and I might even share some of my earnings with you.
I'm making good money, you know. Henry grinned, thinking he could buy our silence with money. But that didn't matter to us anymore.
Unfortunately, we're satisfied with our lives. Write whatever you want on the internet. I'm going to tell Michelle and her parents.
At that, Henry suddenly panicked. He must have realized he had said too much in the heat of the moment.
Wait! You can't do that! If her parents find out, it'll be a huge problem. You can't tell them.
Ken, fed up, grasped the bat again.
Do you really think you can get away with this? It's your fault for concocting such a poor plan. Just accept it. No! I'll write everything online. I'll say it's abuse. Try it if you dare.
While Ken was dealing with Henry, I called Michelle and told her everything Henry had said. I told Michelle everything Henry had blurted out.
I can't believe it. I've decided. I'm sorry to say this to you, Susie, but I'm going to divorce Henry. I'm the one who should apologize. I'm really sorry. I'll also explain everything to your parents.
Then, I called Michelle's parents and told them everything that had happened. They were furious and wanted to have a meeting at my house the next day, so I agreed. When I told Ken, he took away Henry's computer and phone to prevent him from escaping. We watched him all night to make sure he didn't do anything strange. Henry tried to escape several times, but it was futile in front of Ken, a former police officer. The next morning, Michelle and her parents arrived. Michelle's mother agreed to take care of the baby, so they went to another room. Then the discussion began.
I'm completely shocked. Never thought he could be such a person. I'm really sorry. We spoiled him too much since he's our only son. Anyway, Henry, explain yourself.
Michelle demanded, her face showing an anger I had never seen before. Henry, too scared to meet her gaze, mumbled something inaudibly.
Speak up. I can't hear you.
Michelle scolded. Henry then spoke louder, explaining everything. When he got to the part about the false accusation of cuckolding, Michelle's father and she both erupted in anger.
How dare you accuse our daughter of such a thing? How far will you go to disgrace her? It's unbelievable. Susie and Ken are such good people, what a shame.
Faced with everyone's anger, Henry frantically ruffled his hair, unable to lie or make excuses anymore.
After all this, I can't continue our marriage. I'm divorcing you. Please sign the divorce papers right now. You'll also have to pay alimony,
Michelle declared, placing the divorce papers on the table. Henry shook his head, refusing to sign.
Henry, you think you can say no at this point? You brought this on yourself. Sign it,
Ken yelled. Unable to resist, Henry signed under our watchful eyes.
And sign this too,
Michelle said, handing over a document for a generous alimony and child support. Henry reluctantly signed, but then his attitude changed completely.
Don't get too happy just because I signed some papers. What are you saying now? Listen up. I'm a famous person. My work sells for a lot. I have value. If you had just obeyed me, you could have enjoyed the benefits too.
Henry's outburst was unstoppable.
You'll regret cutting ties with me. You'll come crawling back when you're poor and need money. I'll marry my mistress. I don't care about you anymore.
With that, Henry grabbed his phone and computer and left our house. An awkward silence filled the room.
I'm so sorry. How could he turn out like this?
I couldn't help but cry. even though Michelle and her parents were the real victims.
But honestly, divorcing Henry is the right decision. Michelle is a wonderful person, she'll find someone better.
It's not about that. But I'm really glad I met you. If it's okay with you, I'd like to maintain the same relationship as before. Michelle's kindness made me feel even more guilty. But then, her father asked us a favor. Actually, we have a request. Our place is far, and Michelle isn't fully recovered. She also has work. Could you please help take care of her and the baby? We were more than willing.
Of course, don't hesitate to ask us for anything. We'll treat Michelle like our own daughter.
Everyone laughed, relieving the tension. Michelle's mother and the baby came into the living room. We spent time talking about the baby and enjoying their company.
If only Henry realized that happiness isn't about money. He's such a fool. Actually, we were the ones who had been helping him get work. I didn't know that. Yes, but we'll stop that now. He won't be able to work as he used to.
Michelle's father's words turned out to be true. Without their help, Henry's work opportunities plummeted. But he was too proud to ask us for help. He went on to marry his mistress and had a grand wedding. However, the divorce and his dealings got leaked online, and he faced a huge backlash. When I saw it on the news, I asked Henry if he was okay. He blamed us for the leak and cut ties with us. It didn't end there. It turned out the child of his mistress wasn't his. It was probably thought that sticking with Henry, who earned a lot of money, would be safe. Ironically, he ended up being cuckolded. Henry's work, once highly regarded, was no longer valued, and his contracts with various companies were terminated one after the other, leaving him with a hefty amount of penalties to pay. Moreover, his careless handling of tax matters led to further reprimands, and he ended up with a massive debt. I wanted to help Henry multiple times, but Ken stopped me. I understand how you feel, but this is his trial. He needs to overcome this, or he'll just repeat the same mistakes. It was clear, though, that Ken was worried about Henry. With nowhere else to turn, Henry would come to our house, claiming his right as the grandfather of the child. However, I made the tough decision not to let him in. He then resorted to shouting outside our house, "Michelle, I was wrong. Let's make up. Let me take care of the child as his father." He was so persistent that Ken eventually had to call the police to drive him away. Thinking of the worst-case scenario, Michelle quit her job and went back to her parents' house with the baby. Henry gave up and returned to his mistress, who appeared to be quite free-spirited. But he endured, unable to make matters worse in public. In addition to that, he was living in poverty due to his debts. When Michelle learned that Henry wasn't coming around anymore, she started visiting us with the baby, enjoying gardening and cooking together. We grew even closer to Michelle's parents and now often go on trips together. We're looking forward to visiting a tourist spot on our next holiday. Despite everything that's happened, we're living very happily now.
What do you mean by keeping your son handcuffed?
I went to help my son's family move one day. To my surprise, I found my 4-year-old grandson handcuffed in an empty house. My grandson was crouched down, surrounded by empty bread bags and a foul smell. Seeing this, I called my son furiously. However, he seemed confused.
Huh? We've already moved out of there. What?
The identity of the handcuffed child turned out to be quite alarming. I had been widowed a few years ago and now, at 62, lived alone, working twice a week as a hobby class instructor. I enjoyed my job, known affectionately by my students, and it was a source of fulfillment outside of work. My main joy in life, besides my job, was my 4-year-old grandson, Nick. One day, after finishing work, I checked my phone and found a message from my son, Bob, showing the cute birthday party of my grandson.
Nick is already 4 years old. Happy birthday! Can I bring him a present next time?
Bob replied, "Come over anytime." At 34, Bob had worked hard to secure a respectable job and was living in the next city with his family. I wasn't very close to his wife, Jennifer, and saw her maybe twice a year. Without a specific reason, I found it hard to visit. A week later, I bought a character toy for Nick's birthday and some local sweets that Bob liked, and visited their house after a long time. As I opened the door, Nick ran towards me, his face lit up with joy. "Grandma." I was delighted and hugged him. "It was your birthday, wasn't it? Happy birthday." Then Jennifer came and took Nick away from me. "Nick, let go." "Hello, Emily, thank you for coming today." She smiled, but her words felt cold. "Jennifer, I'm glad to visit." "It's been a while, Bob." Pretending not to notice her attitude, I went to the living room and handed Jennifer the sweets and Nick the wrapped toy. Nick's eyes sparkled as he unwrapped it. And he immediately started playing with it. "Mom, Nick is really happy." "Thank you." "That's fine. I don't see him often, so it's the least I can do." After that, we were having a light-hearted conversation, watching my grandson play happily, when my son's phone rang. He said, "It's a work call, I need to step out for a moment," and left the room. "Bob is still busy, isn't he?" "Jennifer, you're doing a great job with Nick." I tried to talk to Jennifer, but she looked stern and was glaring at me. "Emily, please don't give Nick character toys." She said this coldly, without expression. "Why? Last time I saw him happy with this character on TV." "You don't understand. We're focusing on educational toys so he can follow in Bob's footsteps. This kind of toy is a bad influence." Jennifer frowned unhappily, and I felt dejected. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." But she continued to criticize. "And these sweets too. They might be fine for Bob, but I'm careful about Nick's diet. They have additives." "Okay, I'll remember that." "I'm sorry." Bob returned. And Jennifer's mood instantly changed to a cheerful demeanor. Even as we continued talking among the three of us, I couldn't help feeling a bit uncomfortable. So I decided to leave early. As I was leaving, Nick waved, saying, "Grandma, come again." Jennifer gave me a strained smile. Bob and Jennifer met at a speed dating event and married quickly. I was worried about their rushed relationship, but they seemed happy. Jennifer mostly raised Nick alone, and I was grateful for that. Still, her occasional sharp comments weren't new. She must care about Nick. Perhaps Jennifer, being estranged from her own family, was opening up to me in her way. I chose to see it positively. It happened some time later. I bumped into Jennifer and Nick while out shopping in town on my day off. "Oh, Jennifer, what a coincidence. Is Bob at work today?" "Yes, he's away on a business trip." Jennifer's face seemed slightly strained as she answered. "Where are you two headed?" "Well, we're going to the department store downtown." I was headed to the same place and offered, "If you're buying something for Nick, let me chip in. Can I come along?" Suddenly, Jennifer's expression changed, and she snapped at me. "Hey, Emily! Stop it. It's presumptuous of you to just tag along." I was just. "Don't be so overbearing. Don't make decisions for us." While I was taken aback by her reaction, Nick cheerfully told me, "Grandma, we're going to Ryan's house." "Is Ryan your friend?" He nodded in confirmation. "So, you're visiting a friend of yours, Jennifer?" "Yes, that's right." I thought she could have just said so, but I understood that a mother-in-law might be in the way during a friend's meetup. "Take care, then." "Fine, as long as you understand." And Jennifer quickly left with Nick. Watching them leave, I felt something unnatural about Jennifer's behavior. A few months later, Bob suddenly called. "I'm moving at the end of next month because of work. Does that mean you'll be further away?" "A bit, but still within reach." Disappointed that our meetings might become even less frequent, I offered. "Let me at least help with the move." Thinking I could at least help clean up, I asked Bob about the moving schedule. On the day of the move, I went to their house eager to help. But no one answered the doorbell, and there was no moving truck. It's a moving day today, right? Feeling something off, I used the spare key Bob had given me before to enter the house. Inside, it was empty. What's going on? Where are they? Confused, I went inside and was stunned by what I saw in the living room. A small child was handcuffed and crouched, facing away from me.
What? Why?
The child turned around, and I recognized the dirty face.
Nick!
Approaching my startled grandson, he moved away in fear. I thought it best not to frighten him and called Bob, trembling.
What do you mean by leaving Nick handcuffed?
What are you talking about?
I'm at your house right now. Don't play dumb.
Bob sounded confused as he replied.
Wait.
We've moved out of there.
What?
He explained that the move had been brought forward due to work, and he had messaged me about it weeks ago. Indeed, I then remembered receiving a message from my son a few weeks earlier saying, "The move has been brought forward." I must have missed it.
And Nick's right here with me.
I heard a cheerful "Daddy" from Nick in the background. When Nick knew it was me on the phone, he cheerfully called out, "Grandma, come visit our new house and play."
See, Nick's here. But there's another Nick here?
I was utterly bewildered.
Mom, what are you talking about? Are you tired or something?
Bob's voice softened, as if he thought I had lost my mind.
Should we go to the hospital together next time? That's fine, see you later.
I abruptly ended the call with my son to gather my thoughts and took a deep breath. But, indeed, there was a boy handcuffed right in front of me. If Nick is somewhere else, then who is this child in front of me? I looked closely at the child's face again. On closer inspection, he resembled Nick but seemed slightly older than my 4-year-old grandson.
What's your name? How old are you?
The boy with vacant eyes remained silent, simply spreading his palm out, perhaps indicating he was 5 years old. One of his hands was handcuffed, and the other end was attached to the kitchen sink pipe. He couldn't go anywhere. Nearby, there were empty bread bags and a container resembling a dog's water bowl, creating a bizarre scene.
This is terrible.
The child seemed to be wearing a diaper, and there was a foul smell around. I took photos and videos of the scene, then immediately started to unlock the handcuffs.
Hold on, I'll get these off you.
The child, initially frightened, seemed to realize I meant no harm and quietly watched me. He was obedient and watched what I was doing. The handcuffs appeared to be fake, difficult for a child but manageable for an adult to unlock.
You're safe now. Why are you here?
As I freed the child from the handcuffs, I offered him the food and drink I had, continuing to speak to him. However, he remained silent no matter how much I asked. Just as I was considering calling the police, he finally spoke.
Mommy told me to stay here.
He said that he had been living with his father until a week ago when his father suddenly disappeared. Then his mother appeared, brought him here in the middle of the night, handcuffed him, and left. She returned only once, leaving some water and food.
It's cold here, I'm hungry, and I was scared of being alone.
I couldn't help but hug the tearful, pitiful child.
How could a mother do this to her child? Doesn't she have a heart? Who in the world does this?
As I trembled with rage, the child finally revealed his name. So that's how it is. With shaking hands, I took out my phone again and made a call. After explaining the situation, the person on the other line was speechless but promised to come right away. Later, I took the child to the hospital. The next day around noon, I was hiding in a certain place. Soon, I heard the front door unlock and footsteps approaching. I brought food. A woman holding a supermarket plastic bag entered the living room of the house where I was waiting in a closet. I was quietly observing the situation from inside the closet, holding my breath. But the living room was empty except for the handcuffs. Seeing this, Jennifer's face turned pale.
Hey, Ryan! Where are you? Answer me!
Yes, the boy's name was Ryan. The same friend my grandson had mentioned visiting before. And his mother was Jennifer, my daughter-in-law. Ryan had told me everything. That's why I was waiting in my son's old house, expecting Jennifer to bring food today. Jennifer seemed to be frantically searching the house, opening doors loudly. Ryan isn't here anymore.
Emily, what are you doing here?
Jennifer, startled to see me revealing myself in the living room, looked as if she was about to collapse.
I found the boy.
He's been taken to a proper place for protection. Realizing her actions were discovered, Jennifer clicked her tongue and appeared to be deep in thought.
Why did you do this? Tell me the truth.
Speaking gently to avoid upsetting her further, she suddenly started crying.
Actually, before I met Bob, I was in a relationship with a man named Matt and had Ryan out of wedlock.
Jennifer spoke, looking down, seemingly in pain.
But Matt was abusive, and we split up. That must have been hard.
What happened next?
In the end, Ryan was taken in by Matt. I didn't want to let him go, but I had no income, and Matt forcefully took him away.
She struggled to speak, evidently pained by the memory, but continued.
Even after marrying Bob, I would often visit Matt's apartment because I was worried about Ryan.
The day she said Nick was playing with his friend, she was actually heading to Matt's apartment. She arranged for Nick and his friend to meet regularly, giving them a chance to play together as brothers.
It's sad for both being only children, so I thought it was better this way.
Yet, a week ago, after Matt contacted Jennifer, he disappeared. His apartment was vacated, leaving Ryan with nowhere to live. She brought Ryan to this house, which still had a contract until the end of the month.
I swear, I've had no relationship with Matt since marrying Bob. But Ryan is still a precious child to me.
As I listened without responding, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes.
But I couldn't jeopardize my family with Bob. You're a mother, you must understand.
Jennifer collapsed on the floor, crying. She appeared to be a very caring and devoted mother at that moment.
You said Ryan is a precious child to you, right?
Yes, of course. I coldly responded as I looked at her.
Then why would you handcuff him, make him wear a diaper, and refer to his food as feed? That's...
Her facade of a tragic heroine froze.
I thought you were dedicated to education, but is this how you treat a child? There's nothing I can say.
Jennifer's eyes darted around, sweat forming on her forehead.
And what about this?
I took out my phone, played a video, and showed it to her. It showed Nick and his friend playing in front of Matt's place. And Jennifer's voice could be heard from inside.
You were taking Nick to Matt's, driving boys out, and having an affair, weren't you? Well, this is...
I had found Ryan's apartment the night before and talked to the neighbors. One of them, concerned, had recorded the video.
Can you still say you care for the children? You were having an affair with Matt, right?
Jennifer's face turned red with anger.
Bob knows we're a happy family, right? Please don't destroy it. Don't tell him.
As she desperately pleaded, I brushed her off.
Why should I keep quiet? Because Bob is.
She stopped as the balcony door opened, and there stood Bob.
Because I'm a lawyer? Bob.
Jennifer looked utterly shocked. Yes, my son Bob's profession is a lawyer. Jennifer, who had been calmly speaking, suddenly showed her true colors and glared at me.
Why is Bob here? Did you snitch?
Bob stopped Jennifer as she attempted to lunge at me, her face red with anger.
I heard everything. You've been betraying me all this time, haven't you? It's not what it looks like. Listen to me.
She clung to Bob.
Matt is a good-for-nothing. I was deceived by him.
In her panic, Jennifer blurted out something outrageous.
The only thing good about him was our physical compatibility. And you, with your high-income lawyer job, you're the husband I deserve.
Bob looked at her with utter disgust.
Betrayal is one thing, but handcuffing a child is inhumane. I can't forgive you. No, I refuse this.
She started screaming and acting out like a child, to Bob's dismay.
Jennifer, we're getting a divorce. I'm taking care of Nick.
And the police are on their way, so calm down. It's all your fault. If you hadn't found him. In desperation, Jennifer pulled out a knife from her bag and charged at me. Then, brandishing it, she ran towards me. Mom, watch out! In that instant, I dodged Jennifer. She lunged at me, cursing, but I swiftly dodged her. Don't run, you old hag! When she attacked again, I knocked the knife from her hand. Forgot I'm a master of combat sports and run a self-defense class? I pinned her to the floor as she groaned. And police sirens approached. Let me go! I'm appalled you show no remorse. Pay for your crimes. Ignoring her screams, I kept her pinned down. The police arrived, and she was taken away, screaming. Bob and I watched silently. Later, I submitted the evidence to the police. Jennifer had brought other tools to harm Ryan. I was wondering what he was going to do after the handcuffs, but I was horrified when I learned from the police that she had even thought about that. She was arrested, and Matt was interrogated. The divorce was finalized. He's suing Jennifer to ensure child support. Jennifer, having lost everything, will struggle to live a normal life outside. Ryan was taken in by Matt's parents, who seemed decent, so I'm relieved. As for me, I moved in with Bob to help raise Nick. He was initially wary of the change but soon warmed up to me, and I'm teaching him combat sport. I plan to continue staying strong and energetic to watch over my grandson's growth in the coming years.